7 times. And also a lot of Joshua fought the battle of Jericho and the walls came tumbling down. Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. Today is part 4 of the Women in the Bible series. I'm just going to be sharing about several women in the Bible. I will list them here. So if you're interested in learning more about them, then I hope you keep watching. I'm going to be starting out in the book of Joshua. The first woman that we hear about in the book of Joshua is Rahab. She was a prostitute and she actually helped out some Israelite spies. The story ended previously where Moses was leading the children of Israel through the wilderness. Moses ends up dying and then Joshua takes over. So Moses was not going to be the one to actually enter into the promised land, but the Lord raised up another leader. Joshua was appointed by God to lead the children of Israel into the promised land. The children of Israel were going to need to cross the Jordan River and enter the city of Jericho. And ahead of that, Joshua decided to choose 2 men to be spies and go into Jericho, spy out the land, and bring a report back. He chose the 2 men that he chose. They went into Jericho and they ended up going to Rahab's house to stay. And it looked like they were going to stay for the night, but they didn't actually stay for the whole night. But they did go to her house secretly. She hid them. And again, she was a prostitute, so she did not have a great reputation. And while the 2 spies, we don't know their names, while they were at Rahab's house, word got back to the king of Jericho that they were there. The king of Jericho sent his men to Rahab's house and provided them with these orders that she was to bring the men out and, give them to the king's men so that they could be handled in whatever way that they needed to as spies. Rahab ends up telling them, the men were here, I didn't know who they were, and they're not here now. They left at dusk. And dusk is the time of day just after sunset. So according to her, they were already gone before nightfall. And so they accepted her explanation. But really, she had hidden them on her roof under some flax that she had laid out. So they were safe away up on the roof. The king's men left Rahab's house. And because she told them that the men left, the king's men went out of the city of Jericho and the gates shut behind them. Now they're out looking for the 2 spies, and the fact that the gates closed behind them kind of signifies that the city was closed now. And I don't know, maybe they didn't have a key to get back in or no way to open the gates from the outside. I'm not sure, but it sounds as if they're now locked out. Rahab goes up on the roof, talks to the 2 spies. This all happens the same night. So before she goes to bed, she goes up there and talks to them. And she lets them know that the people in Jericho have heard about the Israelites and how they crossed the Red Sea, how the Lord gave them favor. And apparently they had done something to 2 Amorite kings. I didn't really read that part to really discuss it here, but that must have been something that happened where they must have conquered these kings. And the people in Jericho were afraid. They're like, we know the Lord is with these people. So they heard that the Lord had given them their land. So the people in Jericho were scared and they were actually very afraid of the Israelites. She told them this, and she asked that once they come in to conquer Jericho, that she be spared. She wanted for herself and her brothers, sisters, parents, and their families to be protected, be kept alive whenever they came to take over Jericho. And the 2 spies said that, yes, we will guarantee your safety and your family's safety as long as you follow what we say. They told her to leave a scarlet rope outside of her window, hanging out of her window, and then keep her family in the house. Don't let them go outside, because if they went outside and left the house, they would not be able to guarantee their safety and they wouldn't be responsible for them. But as long as everybody was in her house and the scarlet rope was hanging out of the window, they had guaranteed safety. And because Rahab's house was in the wall of the city, it sounds as though that her window faced the outside. So if you were to look out the window, you're basically looking outside. And if you look down, that's the other side of the city of Jericho. And that's the way that these spies escaped back to Joshua and the rest of the Israelites, is that they climbed down this rope through her window and they were on the outside. And Rahab told them, stay in the hill country for 3 days. The king's men are probably out there. They're going to be out there for about 3 days. So stay there. And by the time the 3 days is over, the king's men will have returned to Jericho. And then you can go wherever you need to go because they won't be able to find you at that point. And that's exactly what happened. So 3 days later, the king's men returned. And then the 2 spies left the hill country, crossed back over the Jordan River, and met back up with Joshua. They gave Joshua their full report and told him what happened with Rahab and how they were protected. And they also let Joshua know these people are terrified of us. So the land is definitely ours. The Lord obviously was right. He is giving us this land, and it's going to be easy to take it over because they're scared of us. A few days later, the Israelites crossed the Jordan River, and they actually crossed on dry land, similar to what happened with the Red Sea parting. Certain priests were carrying the Ark of the Covenant, and I'm not going to get into the details of the Ark of the Covenant, but that's just a special thing that they carried with them. And certain priests were carrying it, and when their feet touched the brink of the water receded, and that allowed them to cross over the Jordan River. It was a similar situation to the Red Sea. The Israelites were able to cross the Jordan River with no problems, and now they're outside of the city of Jericho. And God gave Joshua the orders, and the orders that God gave to Joshua were that the Israelites were to march around Jericho 1 time each day for 6 days. And then on the 7th day, they were to march around the city 7 times. And then on the 7th time, priests that were holding ram's horns were to blow the horns. And then when the horn blew, all the people were to shout as loud as they could. And that's exactly what they did. And when they shouted, the walls of Jericho came tumbling down. If you all know that song, Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. Anyway, so they went into the city. They were able to just go straight in and started to pillage it and take all the things that they wanted. They were to destroy everything in the city except for things made with silver, gold, bronze, and iron. Those were the only items they were going to keep, and they were going to put them in the treasury of the Lord's house. And because Joshua knew the story about Rahab, he sent the 2 spies to Rahab's house to, of course, keep their promise. And they went to Rahab's house, and the 2 spies took Rahab and all of her family out of the house, and they sent them to a safe place near the camp of Israel. And once they were in safety, they burned the city of Jericho completely down. And Rahab and her family lived peaceably with the Israelites from that point on. And this is the last we hear of any details concerning Rahab. But we do find out later that Rahab is the mother of a man named Boaz, who we're going to hear about in the book of Ruth. And Salmon is Boaz's father. So Rahab and Salmon had Boaz, and Boaz is very vital to the lineage of Jesus. So the fact that Rahab was kept alive and was able to have her son Boaz and then continue the line which led to Jesus being born, crucial piece of history. Now we're going into the book of Judges, and as the title of the book demonstrates, we're going to be hearing about a lot of judges. And so the Israelites, they're living, time is going on, and they start to do evil in the Lord's eyes. They're worshiping the idols of the people around them. They're serving Baal, worshiping Baal. They're starting to worship the images of Ashtoreth, which is some god there. Lowercase g, of course. And so the Lord is upset, and he allows them to be ruled by some of the kings that are in the neighboring towns or the places where they're living. The first king that we hear about is King Cushan-Rishathaim. And of course, I'm going to put the names of these people on the screen so you can see the spelling and possibly any correct pronunciations. But King Cushan-Rishathaim, he was the king of Syria. He was ruling over the Israelites for 8 years. They cried out to the Lord for help, and the Lord had mercy on them and raised up the first judge that we hear about, and his name was Othniel. And before Othniel becomes a judge, there was a little story about him and a woman named Acsah. This story is just in there. I don't know what relevance it really has to much, but I have to mention this woman because she is actually named, which I thought was interesting because there are several women who have seemingly more notable roles, but we don't learn their names. But for whatever reason, we find out this woman's name. The Israelites in the tribe of Judah are on this little rampage of taking over places. Again, I didn't really get into much detail about the backstory of that, but they are conquering different areas. And Caleb, who was part of the children of Israel, Caleb said that he would give his daughter Acsah to be married to whatever man was able to attack and capture Kiriath Sepher Debir. So I guess this is a place that had the two names, and it just so happened that Othniel ended up being the one to conquer and capture, and so Caleb gave his daughter Acsah to Othniel, and she became his wife. Acsah asked her husband to ask her father for a field. It goes on to say that she got off the donkey. Caleb asked her what's the matter. Acsah tells her father, please give me another gift. You've already given me land in Negev. Please give me springs of water as well. He gave her the upper and lower springs of somewhere. And then that's all it says about Acsah. All right, so now we're back to the judges now. As I mentioned, Othniel becomes the first judge, as far as we know. With Othniel in place as the judge, the Israelites were able to live in peace for about 40 years. But when Othniel died, the children of Israel started acting up again, and the Lord turned them over to the king of Moab. And the king of Moab was Eglon, and he pretty much oppressed the Israelites for about 18 years. And once again, they cried out to the Lord for help. And after they cried out, the Lord raised up Ehud. Ehud killed Eglon. That story is in Judges. He pretty much made up a scenario to go see him, and he stabbed him in his big belly with a dagger. And then when Eglon died, the Israelites lived in peace for about 80 years. And then after Ehud was the judge, Shamgar took over. He was the judge of Israel for a little while. And then Deborah was the first woman that we hear about, at least she was the next judge. As far as we know, she's judge number 4. She was also noted to be a prophet or a prophetess, as some would say. And Deborah would sit under a palm tree in the hill country, and that's where the Israelites would go to find her for judgment. And Deborah was married to a man named Lapidoth. And she was raised up because the Israelites had cried out for help again. The Lord had turned them over to King Jabin. He was a Canaanite king, and he was oppressing them at that time. So pretty much all the different kings around the Israelites would oppress them for a time. They would cry out for help. The Lord would raise up a judge. That judge would conquer the king. The Israelites would start acting up again. And King Jabin and the commander of his army, Sisera, they ruthlessly oppressed the Israelites for about 20 years before Deborah gets involved in this situation. And so Deborah is now going to assist with bringing the Israelites some peace and order again. So she calls Barak. She's a prophet, so she gets messages from the Lord, and she asks for Barak to be brought to her. And when Barak comes to her, she tells him that God has advised that you do this. Gather 10,000 warriors from the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali. She told him to bring the 10,000 men from Naphtali and Zebulun, and that they were to go down to the Kishon River, and that the Lord would call out Sisera, the army commander, and he would have his chariots and his people, and they would meet there, and God would give Barak victory over Sisera. Barak agreed. He said, yes, I will go, but I'm only going to go if you go with me. So it sounds like he was a little bit nervous. He needed Deborah by his side for encouragement or in order to feel confident. So Deborah said, yeah, I'll go with you, but then you will not get the honor of the victory because you will have won at the hand of a woman. And Barak was willing to accept that. They got the 10,000 men together and they went to Mount Tabor. And when Sisera heard they were there, he got 900 of his iron chariots and he went down to the Kishon River. And then Deborah gave the pretty much like the army charge, and she said, get up, get ready, the Lord is going before you. Barak, go take your men and just attack Sisera. And that's exactly what he did. When Barak and the warriors started to attack Sisera, the Lord put Sisera into a panic. So he's in a frenzy. He jumps off his chariot and he runs on foot to get away. And while he's running off and escaping, Barak and his warriors brutally attack all of Sisera's people. They're wiped completely out. Sisera, he runs to this tent, and this tent happens to be a family who is on good terms with King Jabin. And that family is Heber. He's a Kenite. He's also a descendant of Hobab, who is Moses's brother-in-law. Now that's a lot of information. So Hobab, remember Zipporah is from part 3. She was married to Moses. Her brother, Hobab, had some kids. Heber is from his lineage, and Heber was married to a woman named Jael. So Sisera runs to Jael's tent, or somewhere near her tent. She comes out. She says, come in, don't be afraid. You can come into the tent here. And she covers him up with a blanket. And while Sisera's in the tent, he tells Jael he's thirsty and he wants some water. And this woman gives him milk to drink. After he drinks the milk, she covers him up again. And then Sisera tells Jael to stand by the tent door and pretty much guard the door, and tells her that if anybody comes by asking if anybody's in here, tell them no. So she stands by the door, but at some point Sisera falls asleep. And when he falls asleep, Jael takes a tent peg and a hammer, puts the peg at his temple, and she rams the tent peg into his temple, out the other side and into the ground where he's laying. And of course he dies. He's out of there. And now mind you, Sisera went to this tent because this family is supposed to be on good terms with King Jabin, who he works for. Turns out not so good of terms. Anyway, he ends up dying. He's in the tent dead. And now Barak is going to try to find where Sisera went off to, and Jael sees Barak out there looking for him. She's like, okay, come into my tent. I'll show you the man you're looking for. She brings him in the tent and she's like, there he is. There he is right there. He sees him dead, and that's that. So the Israelites conquered King Jabin that day. And as time went on, they grew stronger and stronger against King Jabin until they finally destroyed him. And then that day, there's a whole song in the book of Judges that Barak and Deborah are singing. Deborah is singing about how she arose as a mother for Israel. And they're also singing the praises of Jael for taking out Sisera. And that's pretty much the last we hear of either of those women. Okay, and now moving on to later on. And now we're learning about a man named Jephthah. He's born to a man named Gilead. And he lives in Gilead as well. And his mother was a prostitute. Gilead also had a wife, and he had a few sons with his wife. And the sons he had with his wife didn't care for Jephthah because his mother was a prostitute. They didn't want Jephthah to inherit anything from their father, so they chased him out of the land. And he escaped and started to live in a land called Tob or Tob. And Jephthah was noted to be a great warrior. And that comes into play next because the Ammonites start to attack Gilead, and then the elders decide to go to Tob or Tob and ask that Jephthah come back and be their commander and help them to fight the Ammonites. And so Jephthah's like, okay, weren't you the same people who chased me out of my land? Because I guess he's blaming everybody. I don't know, maybe his brothers were some of the elders, I'm not sure. But he's like, y'all chased me out of the land, you didn't want me there, and now you want my help because somebody's attacking you? And they said, yes, yes, come back. We'll make you the commander of our army, and we'll also make you ruler of all the people in Gilead. So Jephthah agrees. He comes back. They make him the commander. They make him the ruler. And now Jephthah decides to try to reason with the king. He first asks him, why are you attacking? King Ammon is explaining something about land being stolen. Jephthah writes this whole message to explain what actually took place and why should we do this and that. King Ammon wasn't hearing it. And then it's noted that the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah. So he was getting ready to get divine inspiration for taking on this battle and winning. And I think it's noted that the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah to let us know Jephthah was already going to get the victory because the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. But he decides to make this ridiculous vow. He makes this vow that if he's able to conquer the Ammonites, that whatever comes out of his house, he will sacrifice to the Lord as a burnt offering. Now, this is his decision to make. He does win. As I said, I believe it's because the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. He was already going to win, but he made a vow. He comes home from the fight as a winner. All the people know that he won. So who comes out of the house but his daughter, his only child? She comes out with a tambourine. She's playing the tambourine, dancing around, rejoicing in her father's win. And he starts to tear his clothes, and he's like all distraught because it's his only child, his daughter, who he has to now sacrifice because of the vow that he made. He tells the girl, he's crying and weeping, tells her what he did. She tells him, well, you have to honor the vow. You made the vow, so you have to do what you said you were going to do. She's accepting the fact that she's going to be slaughtered. She tells her father, before though, let me go up into the hills and roam around with my friends and cry and weep about the fact that I'm going to have to leave this earth. I'm trying to change words around in a little bit because I don't know if YouTube might not like me saying certain words. And there's a lot of D-E-A-T-H in the Bible and a lot of B-L-O-O-D. And also a lot of... Anyway, so she tells her father, I'm going to leave this earth a virgin, and I want to go up into the hills and roam around and cry and be with my friends for 2 months. She's like, give me 2 months to do this, and then you can do what you got to do. She comes back. Her father does what he said he was going to do, and that's the end of her. And then after that, to commemorate Jephthah's daughter, it became a custom for the young Israelite women to go away for 4 days every year to lament Jephthah's daughter. I was going to continue in this video talking about Samson's mother and Delilah and the Levite concubine, but I don't want to make the video too long, so I'm going to stop it here and I'm going to pick up the next video with those 3. So thank you so much for watching. Thanks for being here. I hope you're enjoying the series. Keeping it going, so whoever's watching, I hope you're liking it. And if anyone picks it up later on, that's great too. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you soon.